Tonight's class, we're going to talk about Marxism versus capitalism a little bit more, and I'm going to show you 5 videos. But before we get started, I want to just do a very quick review, just to remind us where we've been in this whole discussion about, game theory, decision making, and the contrast between individuals and collectives. And I want to remind you, first of all, a few weeks ago, we talked about 5 different kinds of transactions. So as we show these videos, just remember in your mind that we had talked about these 5 kinds of transactions that occur within collectives. The first was capitalism and free or fair trade, and we pointed out that that's very biblical. And some of these videos are really going to talk about why that's such a great, fair kind of a system where you work, you create something of value, you trade that with someone else who's created something of value, and everybody's happy because I got something you made and you got something I made. And really, we get rewarded for serving one another. As I work to serve someone else, to meet someone else's needs, especially if I do a good job at it, I'm creating value that I can trade. And it's a very good system. And it's very much the core of the economy that you see in the Bible. Pretty much all of the thousands of years, it's the same kind of pattern. People work, they trade with one another, and it's basically the foundation of what the Bible talks about. We then talked about charity, the idea that if I give of my own free will to help someone with need, who has a need, that's basically the Good Samaritan. That means I'm a good neighbor. And charity is good because I feel good when I give to someone, and the person who receives my help, they feel grateful. And it's a great way where a capitalist or free or fair trade kind of economy can supplement itself by people selflessly helping each other. And the key word is selfless. It doesn't really help me other than maybe I feel good. My conscience feels good. But, I'm really being selfless. And we found that in the prisoner's dilemma, being selfless actually led to a more optimal society. It was the selfishness that really led to the prisoner's dilemma, where we can show mathematically that if everybody acts selfishly, acts in their own self-interest without really caring about others, it leads to all kinds of suboptimal problems in a society. Now, when we had talked about the prisoner's dilemma, we saw that the problem was people were making selfish decisions, and they were making bad decisions. And that's one of the big motivators for forming collectives. Collectives form because people come to their senses and say, hey, we need to work together. We need to come up with some rules and that we can all agree on. And then we need to make sure that those rules are enforced so that we can live in a better society. And so there has to be some sort of punishments and rewards, and maybe military or police officers to help enforce it. And if we're going to, get organized, we need leadership, and we need to recruit people, make sure people are on board and they don't stray from, the collective. And we talked about all those properties of the collectives. Now, a third way that we can distribute wealth is stealing. People just take things from other people. And of course, that's not biblical, right? The Bible teaches thou shalt not steal. It's one of the 10 commandments. And stealing, of course, is bad. And if stealing is bad, it implies the concept of ownership of property. If nobody owns anything, then how can you steal? And so the Bible very much supports the notion that when you work and create things, you own it. You can own property, according to the Bible. It's pretty much at the core of all of the economies described throughout thousands of years in the Bible. Now, a fourth thing, and this is kind of what we talk about with socialism and Marxism, is this idea of redistribution of wealth. You work, but you don't get rewarded necessarily based on the value you create when you work. Instead, everybody works, puts whatever they create into a big pile, and the government decides who gets what. And they do it in a way, hopefully, where everybody's needs are met and it's supposed to be a utopia-like environment. In a way, it's the government forcing everybody to be charitable and the government deciding who needs charity and who doesn't. And it's very, very different from free will giving. Yes, we see in scripture cases, for example, uh, when Joseph went to Egypt and there was a famine, they decided to save all the grain so that when the famine would come, they'd be able to still feed the people. The government was taking things into their own hands to kind of provide a safety net for the people. And there's nothing wrong with the government providing a safety net. Problem is when you start, you know, deciding that someone has too much and someone else doesn't have enough, and you start, just redistributing what, the wealth that people have created. And the fifth type of transaction is when, let's suppose the society is really corrupt and you have rich people who are through, really corrupt dealings, get rich and they keep the poor down, maybe a caste system. And society says, hey, this isn't right. This is really wrong. This is like Robin Hood, where the rich are rich and they suppress the poor, and the poor kind of step up and say, hey, we're not going to put up with this anymore. And we sort of have two scenarios. One is, what if the society really is corrupt? Then it would be justifiable for the people to say, hey, this is corrupt. We need to stand up and resist this and try to, correct this. On the other hand, this sort of mentality can be used to deceive people, to rebel when there really is no corruption. And it can be used to bring about revolutions, which is one of the strategies that radicals use to bring about revolution. So we talked about these 5 different, really very different modes of transactions, and we showed really that capitalism and selfless charity are biblical, and they're great. Everyone's happy when we have free and fair trade, and when you're charitable and giving. It's when stealing occurs, or when the government somehow takes control and starts disincentivizing you to work and redistributing your work and dismotivating you to work hard, because why should you work hard? You're not getting anything out of it. And we showed that mathematically, and I'll remind you of that. And then, of course, this Robin Hood thing. And then I showed you, here is a person who is being taken care of. He's got free housing. He has all the food, he needs to stay alive and hopefully be healthy. If he gets sick, a doctor will come and see him. He's given work to do. Some recreation. The facility that he's in decides what's appropriate in terms of how much recreation, maybe an hour a day. There's definitely a community environment in there. And, there are books and things he can read if he wants to get an education. It's all free. And, when we talk about all these benefits of being taken care of, the problem is this really freedom? And, we sort of have this trade-off. Do we want to be free, as individuals, or do we want to be taken care of, part of a collective? And so then I showed you this slide, this diagram that showed how we kind of organize ourselves politically. Going left to right, you have, in that dimension, the horizontal dimension, on the right, you have people that are very individualistic. And on the left, you have people that very much like to be part of a community, almost melting in, where you're just part of a team, a group, and there are people that like that, to kind of an extreme. And there are people that are very individualistic. And that characteristic is, I can't prove one being better than the other. It's just who you are. Do you like being part of a community? In the church, people that are very selfless, part of a community, they typically serve in all kinds of ministries. They're selfless. They don't want credit. They're just happy to serve. Whereas people that are much more individualistic tend to sometimes be leaders, or they're going off on their own, starting their own ministries, and very individualistic, maybe even a little bit rebellious, not wanting to go along with the group. And then the vertical axis is our view in terms of our devotion to God going on the top, and on the bottom being antagonistic towards God. And we found that just those two variables, you could begin drawing regions in the space that begin defining collectives that we see, where people would say, I'm in this sort of collective, and just based on those two variables. And these collectives form, they organize, they all have political agendas, and they fight each other, they try to recruit, they try to keep their members from straying. So, any one of these kind of regions in space where you're finding yourself joining, within that community, they want you to, listen to what they have to say, and they try to get you to not listen to any other points of view. So here we are, right? In this world, we're all divided into these different political collectives. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to show in this class 5 videos. One of them, I think, is trying to be pretty pro-Marxist, and it's very interesting, the Utopia vision of Karl Marx. And then there are several that are much more pro-capitalist. They're shorter videos, though. And you'll see even, assuming Joe Biden becomes the president, Vice President Kamala Harris's view of things. And I think it'll lead to a very interesting discussion. And I showed you a couple of weeks ago how Marxism, really socialism, where everybody works, but you don't get rewarded based on your work, on the value you produce. Everybody just shares whatever everybody produces equally. And so the question was, if you're selfish and you look at your quality of life, should you work or work hard, or should you goof off and not work, be a freeloader? And it's always, if all you care about is your own quality of life, you're being selfish. This is the prisoner's dilemma problem again. It's always better to not work. If you work, your quality of life is not as good as if you don't work. Because whatever it is, like, and we looked at 80%, suppose 80% of the people are working, so you sort of, move up that vertical line, where the 80% is. So, you have your 80% going up. That bottom curve is if you work, but if you don't work, you have, let's say, 40 hours free time. Your quality of life is better, and you're still sharing what basically 80% of the people are producing. So whether you work or whether you don't work, it's almost, you don't notice any difference, except you don't have to spend 40 hours a week in a factory. And so you realize, if you're selfish, it's better not to work. And so as people who are selfish, they begin to realize that what ends up happening is the percent of people who work goes down, and eventually it goes down to such a low point that the quality of life is worse, even if you don't work, than it would have been, let's say at 20%. If you look at where that top curve is, that's if you don't work. That's your quality of life right around 0.3. But if 80% of the people were working, the quality of life, if you do work, would be at around 0.6. And so you see how Marxism doesn't work, because people tend to be selfish, and that means they either don't work or they don't work very hard. They goof off a lot. There's no incentive. And the productivity of the society goes way down, and it ends up meaning that everybody suffers. That's why places like Venezuela, they have shortages of toilet paper and food, and all of these communist countries where they have food lines, and the stores hardly have anything in them, and if they do, it's not like the plentiful variety that we have in a free market kind of a society. And I want you, before we show the videos, I just want you to imagine two countries side by side. Imagine there's two countries side by side. They're both equal. They have the same farmland, the same cities. Everything about them is equal. Except these two countries decide to have different political structure. One is a Marxist country where everybody who works, you just take whatever you produce and you share it equally with everyone else in your country. The other country is capitalistic. And that country says, look, you work, whatever value you create, if you work hard, you're going to create more value. You can have more. You're basically the rewards in life are based on merit. And okay, so you take a bunch of people. Let's say this is America, divide it in half, and you say to 365 million people, maybe decide they want to live in Marxism, and the other or 165 million decide I want to live in a capitalist country. And suppose you set up the border where people could freely go in between. You want to leave your country, go to the other country, that's fine. Okay? Now, in the capitalist country, you work hard, you get paid for what you do, the value you create, and the only thing that's there to help people that are suffering is charity. In the other country, there's no charity, and everybody who works, you just sort of take everything that's produced and you just share it equally. Well, the first question is who is going to go to the capitalist country and who is going to go to the Marxist country? And I can guarantee you, most people who want to work hard and be rewarded for that, and most people who are charitable will go to the capitalist country. And most people who are kind of freeloaders, they want to kind of take it easy, or perhaps they're, they don't really trust that they're going to get charity in the capitalist country, and they just want to go somewhere where they're taken care of. Maybe the elderly, they want their, security, social security kind of stuff. They're going to go into the Marxist country. And guess what's going to happen? Marxist country is not going to produce very much, and the people will suffer. And the capitalist country, they're going to thrive because people are working hard. They're being rewarded for, their hard work. And so, you're going to have people potentially migrate back and forth. But if you don't want to work hard, you're not going to the capitalist country. And those who want to work hard, who believe they should be rewarded for working hard and maybe being successful, the country is going to thrive. And you can just see if you have these two systems in place and let the migration of people between the two countries be open, you're going to see very clearly. The hardworking people are going to go to the capitalist country. The capitalist country is going to be extremely successful economically. And the people who maybe need help or don't want to work hard, they're going to be in the poor country, in the Marxist country, and they're going to suffer. And the only thing that allows the capitalist country to have people who, if they're struggling or maybe they get older, the only thing that is really there in place is charity. And it takes us right back to the prisoner's dilemma. What if people were happy to share their wealth of their own free will to help others that are in need? All of the problems in society would be solved. And that's what we're called to do as Christians.